I thought I'd make another video of another book I recently read, or I should say reread, which is Jurassic Park. And I wanted to do a little review of this novel. It's like 25 years old now. The novel, I think, came out 1990, if I remember. The movie came out 1993. I was in third grade. Begged my parents to see it. I did see the movie. I do think I read the book before I watched the movie as a kid, but as a kid, of course, I didn't understand most of it. Then I reread the book. I know I reread it at least in fifth grade when the movie first was released on regular television. And I was able to, I think I watched it then as well, because I remember talking about it in class. And then also, when I reread the book, I mostly just skipped the first 100 pages and went right to the park and the dinosaurs, because I loved reading about the dinosaurs. I loved reading about, Dennis Nedry being murdered viciously by the Dilophosaurus. I loved reading about the Tyrannosaur and the raptors toward the end. And for some reason, in my kid brain, I couldn't make sense of a lot of the story. And I was mostly there for the action, which at the time there was a lot of action. But this time, I'm 40 years old and I'm rereading this book because I just felt like I've recently fallen in love with rereading material, and it's so nice to just be able to go back to something many years later. It's kind of like rewatching an old movie where you see it differently. And when you reread a novel, you read it differently. So Jurassic Park is something that I have not read. And did you know that Ian Malcolm dies at the end? So he dies. Like, it's confirmed he's dead. So it's been a long time since I've reread or read The Lost World. I'm not sure if I read it more than once, but it's been a long time since I've read The Lost World. And I know Ian Malcolm's in The Lost World. I'm pretty sure he's in it. So somehow he's not dead. Somehow he's retroactively made to be alive again. But I wrote down I have on my laptop here a few things that I wanted to talk about with this book, Jurassic Park, which is, again, 25 years old. Eerily, the book did not feel dated reading it. That was kind of strange to me. You watch a movie and it feels dated, but an old book sometimes does not feel dated. The technology didn't seem that ridiculous, didn't seem ridiculously out of date. What would be out of date about it? I mean, I don't know. Even the computer systems, everything, like they had several supercomputers, so computers ran basically as quickly as you would expect a modern computer to run. In fact, the device that I'm recording this on is more powerful than the Cray XMP supercomputer that is used in the book, where they had three of them. I think it was like 128 megs of RAM. I would have to look it up, but I'm not going to do that for you because it's unimportant. Needless to say, all of us have supercomputers. But a few points. The first point is Hammond. John Hammond is quite ridiculous. He's evil, basically, in the book. He's this very spoiled man-child. He stamps his little feet. His feet are swinging, hanging off the ground. Like Michael Crichton really wanted to obviously paint a picture of Hammond being this no good guy. He's not a good guy. He's not a sweet old man grandpa like in the movies. In the book, he's quite annoying. He's obnoxious. He's a know-it-all. He thinks he has all this great vision. And he doesn't seem to care much about his grandkids, which ultimately he dies at the end of the novel because of his grandkids. And I mean, had they not been there, nobody would have been left alive to do anything with the computer system. They would never have gotten back on track. But with them there, that also spelled the doom of John Hammond. Just in his foolishness, not Malcolm, but Michael Crichton didn't like this character, obviously, and I know he did. I believe he did the screenplay for the movie, and he made John Hammond a much more likable character, and did not kill him at the end. Probably because nobody wants to see an old man get eaten by the compies. But John Hammond was every time he spoke, every scene he was in, he was not a pleasant person. And that actually kind of makes sense why he would create an enemy out of Dennis Nedry. Nedry was not like this obviously nefarious evil character in the novel. He has a bad death. He's trying to make money for himself, but this is because he's screwed over by John Hammond. He's made to do more work than what his contract was about, and he has this huge park system that he's asked to program with his team back in Cambridge, and I believe it was Cambridge. But Dennis Nedry isn't like an obviously evil character. He's just a part of the chaos theory, and I'll get into chaos theory in a bit. A few other just points about the dinosaurs themselves. I thought the Tyrannosaur was obnoxious. I think Crichton just wanted a lot of the Tyrannosaur action felt like filler to me. I felt like Michael Crichton wanted to. In my opinion, he just envisioned these things that sounded interesting to him about what the Tyrannosaur could do. And then, of course, the Tyrannosaur has to pursue Grant and the kids in order to create a thriller aspect, because his book is like a techno thriller. A lot of his genre has the thriller theme or style to it. And just to get people reading and pursuing, going through the chapters quickly, but it felt like filler after a while. Like you're using the biggest, scariest dino. You don't want to introduce the raptors yet. They're for the last act. So you're dealing with just this huge dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Everyone recognizes it, and it's wreaking havoc of the park, killing dinosaurs. It's chasing Alan and the kids, and then through various means. But I think also, like, he was just trying to describe dinosaurs through Alan Grant's eyes, who, he made Alan Grant the dinosaur expert, so that as that's why Alan's the one who gets stuck in the park, because he's the dinosaur expert. Ellie doesn't get stuck in the park because she's the botanist, she's the paleobotanist, having to deal with plants. She understands and knows about dinosaurs, but not to the point Grant does. So Grant I think the kids being left with Grant was just a feature of upping the ante, of having more skin in the game, of making it a little bit scarier, having innocent children potentially killable. He kills off Ed Regis, a fairly minor character, fairly quickly. This character does not show in the movie. Gennaro, I call him Gennaro. I don't know if it's Gennaro. I think it's Gennaro. I think in the movie they say Gennaro. But Gennaro is the lawyer, and he goes with Ellie, with Harding, back to base, essentially. And they are not able to... They're fairly minor characters. They don't actually play much of a role. In fact, Ellie almost seems like she's just there for a couple points. She's actually, other than the fact that she's described as a young woman, and other than the fact that it's described that the men there are attracted to her, and that she's attractive, you don't really know Ellie is a woman. Like, he didn't write her very well as a character. I see what people say when they mention that Michael Crichton's characters are there's not a lot of depth to them. In fact, I have a theory about that. I was thinking that Malcolm, Ellie, Grant, Harding, Muldoon, Wu, Gennaro and Hammond, even the kids, they were all, because he makes Tim like a little bit of a kid dinosaur nerdy expert and a computer geek, just for the plot. But I felt like each character was a plot device to explain some kind of sciencey thing. And that's why that character exists. Harding exists because it makes sense to have a vet on site, but also he wanted to just have a few little blurbs of point of view through Harding. Ellie was there as the paleobotanist. I mean, she didn't necessarily need to be a paleobotanist, but he just wanted to make a couple points about plants. And then Ian Malcolm, his whole existence was just to explain chaos theory. And chaos theory is what the book was actually about. So I guess I'll go into that now before I go through some of my other points. But chaos theory is something that, if I can briefly recount what chaos theory is, it's this inability for science to accurately predict everyday life. I believe that this is partially why. Sorry about the camera moving around. I need to get a way to mount it in my car in a much more steady way, with a car mount for the phone. I'm in my car because I read somewhere that it makes a great little studio for sound and lighting. So that's why I'm using it. That's why I'm sitting in my car talking into my phone. Chaos theory is where you cannot accurately predict mathematically what's going on in reality, essentially. He likens it to Heisenberg's uncertainty, and that's more related to the imperfectness of how we measure things, I believe, if I'm recalling that correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. But with chaos theory, an example I can give to you is that when you take the example in the book, one of the examples, and the example they use in the movie, is when you hold your hand out and you take a drop of water and you allow the drop of water on your hand, and it rolls off your hand a certain way. And then you don't move your hand and you take another drop of water and you drop it in the same place. And due to imperfections in your skin, due to how the electrons and your atoms are moving around, due to turbulence, due to air pressure, the hair on your skin, whatever, the drop of water is going to roll off somewhere else, or you can't predict where it's going to roll off. And then I had recently watched a video where a guy was talking about robots, and the question was, where are they? Where are the personal robots? Why don't we have personal robots? And it's because it's so difficult to calculate everyday things, of like being able to predict where an object will be when you push it. That's easy to do in space when there's no friction, and our calculations can predict eclipses, as there was an eclipse recently, and things of that nature, where the heavenly bodies will be thousands of years from now. We can calculate that with fairly good accuracy, but we can't calculate with good accuracy when I push an object where it's going to end up. There's too many things going on. Chaos theory doesn't mean pure chaos where everything is utterly random. I mean, there's still certain factors, like if I put a drop of water on my hand, I don't expect it. I don't predict it to bounce off and like have no gravity affect it or anything. I expect it to hug my hand as it drips down somewhere. But we can't perfectly calculate everything about it. And this is why robotics is a very difficult field, especially with the personal robots, and being able to calculate everyday things that we're always taking care of all the time, constantly adjusting for parameters that our senses are taking all the time. So with chaos theory, the whole book is about chaos theory because he creates this park. He reiterates over and over and over why everything has to be, everything's, spared no expense. Everything's perfect. He's taken all this trouble to make everything in the park just right. And then Ian Malcolm says it's just going to fail. Without even needing to see it, he already predicted that it's going to fail. And of course he's right, because the author wrote him and is just using him as a mechanism to talk about chaos theory, and that mankind's attempt to perfectly capture and encapsulate something through science is a mistake. It will fail. It's guaranteed to fail mathematically through chaos theory. And he talks about the Malcolm effect in the book, and the Malcolm effect is everything just going downhill very sharply. And that of course, that's just a literary device that does happen in his book. It takes like 100 pages just to get to the park, and then another 100 pages of in the park, and then in the last third of the book, everything hits the climax very suddenly, and suddenly the park is just completely destroyed. But I could see, reading through, all the little details of things that had to be in place in order to show you that this park is not so perfect like John Hammond expects or says it is, and that they don't have control over it, and that the littlest thing can throw it out of whack, and then it all goes to hell in a handbasket. And then Malcolm's effect, the suddenly going down, sharply going downhill, suddenly, is something that happens towards the end there, when they think they have control of the park again, but they're on auxiliary power and they lose power, and then they really are in trouble. And then that's when most of the characters die, and so on. Some other things. I felt like Alan Grant's character I feel like the guy, Sam Neill, I believe is his name, the guy who acted Alan Grant in the movie, he brought that character to life. I think the actors in Spielberg's movie brought the characters more to life than what Crichton was able to do in his book. Because Alan Grant didn't strike me as a very personable character. Even though he liked kids because kids like dinosaurs, he didn't dislike kids. He was just saying, as a dinosaur expert, how could I dislike any group of people that love dinosaurs? And this makes me think, actually, I just had a sudden thought, which is Lex, the young girl who's 8 years old in the book, and Tim is 11. She is the most annoying character, but she's annoying in a very realistic way. As he was I feel like his most accurate character was Lex. She seems like the most real character in the whole book. This whiny kid who's terrified, who's extremely obnoxious to Tim as he's trying to work the computer. And I just thought that was interesting. I just had that thought that she was the most accurate character. Alan Grant, not very impressive. I think I was expecting more of his character in personality because of the movie. But upon reading the book, he just didn't seem... he seemed a bit cold. He didn't have much depth to him. And I think what I wanted to discuss, another thing here, because I'm writing about how I was writing notes to myself about how the characters were clearly plot devices to explain ideas. So he used Henry Wu to explain genetics and all the genetic angle that he wanted to talk about. Harding with zoology and being a vet. Ellie with some brief plant lore. Muldoon was the expert hunter. He brought the angle of the guy who grew up in the savannah and the safari area of Africa. So he brings up that sort of expertise that gives him a different way of looking at the dinosaurs. And Gennaro he was the venture capitalist guy. I don't know if he was a lawyer. He might have been a lawyer, but he was a venture capitalist, in my opinion, he had like a 5% stake in the park. So I'm not exactly sure if I recall him being much of a lawyer or if he was just a businessman. But he had his own separate angle. He had his own part to play, which was scared guy, way out of place, no expertise, no understanding of animals at the degree Muldoon had or Grant and Ellie had, because they were scientists who dealt with animals. Even though they're extinct animals, they still understood animals very well, and so did Muldoon, just from experience. Gennaro was the guy who was supposed to be like us, who had no experience, who'd be freaking out, panicking, and even though he was described as a big muscular guy, a strong guy, he was a total coward through the book. But he did well for himself. He pushed himself to help. Like, he wasn't a joke of a character. He was actually responding in realistic ways, and Grant was just annoyed with him because it was partially his park. He enabled it with money. Arnold took the engineering way, and he was the anti-Malcolm. He in one part of the book argued against what Malcolm was talking about with the chaos theory, and Arnold was the guy who was with Hammond on, hey, we have control over everything and we're getting control back. But one thing I noticed is a lot of whenever he wanted one of his characters to explain stuff, he would have another character who was not an expert in that area asking these softball questions to the character who was an expert. And I thought that gave me an insight into his writing, because I believe I've read all of his books that he wrote under his name, Michael Crichton. I didn't read anything that he wrote with his pen names, but it seems like a literary device he uses a lot, where he has a character who's knowledgeable about something and then a character who doesn't have knowledge about that thing, and he has one character explaining that stuff to that other character, and that other character is asking the right questions to continue the conversation. Another thing that I thought was an interesting literary effect or style, I don't know if it was stylization, I don't know what you would describe it as, but Michael Crichton has this way of giving his characters first and last names. Now, I don't know if some books don't even give a character a name at all, but with Crichton, he gives you the first and the last name. And I thought that was actually very good for the following reasons. Maybe I just have one reason. I don't know. I don't need to make a list right now, but it made it easier to remember the characters. Yes, I already know the characters because it's a reread. Yes, I know the characters because I've seen the movie, multiple times when I was a kid, and I'm just an older adult, and I was reading the book slowly, so I wasn't just burning through it and then thinking, who's this character again? But giving each character a first and last name, and then giving each character kind of a specialty, made it easy to remember who they were. This time I read the book, I was a lot more interested in the first 100 pages. Felt a little bit like being a fly on the wall for how powerful corporations and organizations are able to finagle something like a Jurassic Park, and the slow buildup of the dinosaurs escaping the island, going to Costa Rica and creating havoc, and just kind of some of the being a fly on the wall in scientists' offices and with scientists like Grant, prior to them being on the island, and then people not quite believing the Procompsognathus remains, and the difficulties that scientists face trying to identify things and trying to do stuff with that. I thought it was quite interesting. As an adult, I found that stuff interesting. As a kid, all the InGen stuff, the corporate intrigue, that stuff didn't interest me at all. But this time, as an adult, I found all of the corporate stuff, all of the science stuff, much more interesting, and the discussions from Malcolm. So that was a big win on my reread. I felt like I got more out of the book in that way. Let's see if I had any other I don't think I had much else to say, other than I think that he used dinosaurs. I don't know why exactly he decided to use dinosaurs, other than what I think the reason is. Because he wanted to talk about chaos theory and describe how a perfect system, no matter how well it was put together or built, was going to fail. And he wanted to kind of give a good narrative, a good metaphor for chaos theory, so people understand it better. But I think that he used dinosaurs because that was one unpredictable element that mankind has never faced before. So mankind, it's mentioned many times in the book, where humans have never dealt with dinosaurs before, and humans have never dealt with, like, it's hard enough dealing with life in general, creating a zoo and stuff like that. But now we've created a zoo with animals that mankind has never had to deal with before, and knows absolutely nothing about the living version of those beings, of the dinosaurs. I think that's why he chose dinosaurs, because they were this other animal, not quite avian, not quite reptile, not quite lizard, sort of a combo of those things, but something completely brand new, outside of the experience of man. And he used them as the vector for a park just going to chaos and failing. So I thought that was interesting. Because before I thought he chose dinosaurs because they're awesome. Because as a kid, to me, dinosaurs were amazing. They were awesome. Why not write about dinosaurs? But I think he chose the dinosaurs for the reason that they were an animal that's real, that exists because we have the fossils, but they're an animal that mankind has never had to deal with before. And that just made it more interesting and gave, I think, a better way for him to explain chaos theory and things falling apart through this animal that no one had experience with before. So I think that's why he chose dinosaurs. And it became like a big deal, because he chose dinosaurs, and he chose to try to figure out what the latest findings, the latest science on dinosaurs was like. And by doing that, he just launched the whole culture into a new understanding of dinosaurs that hasn't happened since. It's been 25 years. Most people still think of dinosaurs as they were portrayed in Jurassic Park. If you look at stuff, there's a lot more feathering to many dinosaurs that they suspect now. And even the T-Rex looks different, slightly different, but different. If it's not feathered, it's more full-bodied, and the head shaped different, has lips, so you don't see the big jagged teeth. It's interesting to take a look at what they think the dinosaurs actually look like now compared to then. But he was still very, very advanced in his understanding, because he was going with the latest science. And that made it so much more enjoyable and so much more memorable for everybody. So I think I'm going to wrap this up soon. That's mostly what I wanted to talk about. I felt like rereading Jurassic Park, it was still interesting. I found the dinosaur thriller parts to actually be the most boring parts of the novel. This time around, I didn't care for the action. I used to love action so much, but I didn't care for the action. That was actually like the worst writing in the novel. But his best writing was when he was taking the place of the scientists, when he was trying to speak through the scientists. That was his real knack. That was his real gift, was talking the science, talking the philosophy, talking the math. and the technology, the dinosaur stuff, the action, the thriller, I think that was just to cater to the masses, really. I don't think that was so important. I don't think he wanted to write a sequel to it. I mean, it was clear that there were no plans for a sequel by the time he wrapped up the book. I thought the book ended too quickly, to be honest. I thought I was disappointed in the ending. I didn't like the ending at all. The bombing of the island, how quickly, like as soon as Grant's out of the raptor nest area, it's just over. It's done. Suddenly there's a helicopter there. They're getting the hell out of there, and then they bomb the island, and it's done. And then he's just stuck in a hotel in Costa Rica for an unknown period of time. And it's noted that raptors have escaped and they're migrating. I don't know. I didn't love the ending. I feel like they could have. I feel like given how long it took for him to get to the island, he could have unwound it better. There could have been an extended novel version of him unwinding the aftermath a bit better. But I don't know. I don't know if he just. I think Michael Crichton wrote quickly, and maybe when he decided he was done, he was just done, and he wrapped it up. And I think it's. I have come to understand that it's difficult to end a book, and I think that his ending for this was a bit abrupt. I wanted a bit more I'm trying to think of the term, debriefing. I wanted a bit more debriefing after they got off the island, more so than what they had. At least having Grant and Ellie talking, maybe giving us a little more science talk or impressions of Grant afterward. It just seemed, again, I didn't love the ending. Okay, I think that's everything I wish to talk about with this novel. At the end of the day, rereading a book is a nice pleasure that's accessible to everyone. If you can think of a book you read when you were younger that maybe you think you didn't get everything out of it, or your life itself has changed enough to the point where you're like, maybe I can reread that and get something out of it. Go ahead, reread the book. I'm currently on the third Lord of the Rings novel. I'm rereading the Lord of the Rings. The last time I read them was when I was a teenager, so I thought that was worth a reread. And I'm going to make a video about those books afterwards as well. Maybe not in depth, but I will make a video. Anyways, thank you for watching this, and goodbye.